Hello, everyone. I'm Keshav Gupta, and I'm the founder of the Dais. On behalf of the Dais and people of impact, we would love to welcome you all to the Dais Global Voices program, second edition, and that's being done as a part of the Learning Planet Festival. The Learning Planet Festival is celebrating education, the International Day of Education, and on the theme of learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet. The Learning Planet Festival was launched by the Learning Planet Institute, formerly known as the Center for Research and Interdisciplinarity, based out of France, along with UNESCO, and this is the third edition of the festival. This year, we have seen over 400 events happening around the world, online, on the ground, hybrid events, and there have been 250 partners around the world who've gathered together to celebrate the International Day of Education. So, I think on behalf of both the Dias and people of Impact, we are very grateful for all of you to join us. Today, we are discussing the future of education and the role of industry in the same. And the DICE and the people of impact, both the organizations as we are committed to the sustainable development goals. I think it's our big pleasure to be working together on a Humanity 2030 collaboration, and that represents the value of humanity, human values, besides all the SDGs that I think lies at the core of what the DICE and people of impact, both as organizations, believe in. We both endorse wholeheartedly the message of leaving no one behind, and Humanity 2030 at large envisions a better world, a more equal world with equal opportunities for all, and to be empowering people around the world through the same. Just a quick reflection, I think, on the dialogue today. We have four incredible speakers who will be today joined by our moderator, Miss Dimiana, who again comes with a wealth of experience. She's the senior partner of innovation and partnerships for people of impact. And the reason why like this dialogue we thought will be important is that both future and education are intertwined with each other, uh, as well as the present. So with COVID-19 pandemic, with all the changes that the world is experiencing, not just with the pandemic, with the technology and with the different geopolitical shifts, it is imperative that we look at education from a fresh perspective. There are new narratives to education which are now coming in. We are talking about systems change and so on. So there can't be any better speakers than the lineup that we have today, which has joined us. So without wasting further time, for from my end, I will just humbly welcome our moderator Dimiana to take over the discussion today. And once again, thank you, and hope this is a great dialogue for all of you. Please remember that the dialogue is not just on the screen; it's also on the chat box. So please use the chat box as all the participants. All of what you say is very valuable to us. So please, we do encourage you, whether you're joining us from Facebook Live or the Zoom chat, please do use both the forums for enriching our discussion. Thank you so much, and best wishes to all of you. Over to you, Demiana.
Right, wonderful. Thank you, Keshav. Partnerships like ours are essential to innovating a better world for all of us. And like you so eloquently shared, leaving no one behind. I'm Demiana Farag, and I'm from People of Impact. It's a social impact consulting and innovation and collaboration platform focused on advancing the SDGs and driving inclusive economic growth and development. And our vision is to create a more inclusive, sustainable, and equitable future for all. A world where education is recognized as a right, where quality education is accessible to all, despite their age, gender, status. The cornerstone of our work is to ensure, again, that no one is left behind. Let's keep that in mind always. So today's discussion directly links actually to the UNESCO's recent global report, Reimagining Our Futures Together, a new social contract for education. And in that report, it called for a social contract based on two principles. One, assuring the right to quality education throughout life. And the second, strengthening education as a public endeavor and a common good. Joining us today is a brilliant panel of experts from diverse experience from the private, public, and academic sectors. We'll be discussing the role of industry in the future of education, challenges our speakers have seen most urgent, possible solutions, and key points we can take away, each one of us. Each one of us has a role to play in redefining our future. So I'd like to welcome first our audience as well. Like Keshav mentioned, it's in life that we all engage with each other and really where true education comes. And throughout this discussion, I invite you to share your thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat. And following questions that will be posed to the speakers, we'll also open up to question and answers. And now without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Dr. Mubina Iqbal, Iman Hamshari, Suzanne Essayed, Manal Zainuddin. Dr. Mubina Iqbal is the head of general education at Amity University, Dubai, an academic leader with over 17 years of experience in higher education, expertise in strategic planning and implementing academic programs at a university level. Passionate about inspiring students by creating an ecosystem of mentoring, counseling, and facilitating achievement of their professional goals. Iman Hamshari is Director of Educational Innovation and Engagement at Talim Group. With over 15 years of experience in grades K through 12 and a master's degree in international policy and management of education, she's a design thinking facilitator, teacher training, experienced in developing school-based innovation policies, strategies, and STEAM programs. Suzanne Sayed is Safety Policy Manager for Africa, Middle East, and Turkey at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. She's Egyptian, based in London, with extensive experience across the region. Prior to that, she has 7 years of experience as a management consulting across the MENA region and UK, with a focus on the public sector and governments. Then she holds a master's degree in policy studies and education from University of College in London. Manal Zainuddin, a founder of Orbit's Development Code, global education consultant, and certified quality management specialist. She has 21 years as a teacher and director. Manal has experimented and been experimenting and researching practices responsive to her passion in education and her inner call to solve problems at the grassroots level first. She has long been experiencing, implementing, evaluating, and supporting a belief that education exceeds teaching and learning. She has trained hundreds of leaders and teachers and has been recognized by the Ministry of Education. Manal helps students redesign their environments through her research-based quality targeting approach for conscious learning and programs about conscious leadership, quality management, climate and culture, and conscious development of leaders and teachers. Whew, you are all a powerhouse, an amazing group of women that really, if we haven't learned just from your experiences alone, I don't know what we would.
We all are.
Yes, and we're so happy that you're here to join us. And so what we'd like to do here, first to start off with, I'd like to ask you your first question as what are your most urgent challenges that you recognize today for the future of education? And also I welcome the audience. Please, I invite you to write in the chat also your thoughts. Should we start with Dr. Mubina?
Thank you, Damiana. Thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel. I'm very happy to be part of People of Impact. I think the work that you're doing is amazing and glad that you have made us part of it. Speaking about the question, I think education, especially over the past year and a half, has seen such an historic disruption owing to the pandemic, and nearly 90% of the world's learners have been affected by it. I think it has also brought about a very deepened technology divide. Keeping that in mind, in general, if we have to speak about the future of education, I think the three challenges that I feel that are dominating now, the first one is the industry-academia gap. So this gap that we speak about has been established, I think, decades ago, and it still exists, and we're still talking about it till date. Gaps in many forms like skill gaps, knowledge, culture, mindset, and so on. Learners by themselves form the very core of our entire education system and process, and preparing them for industry, preparing them for employability, and continued sustenance of them is very, very vital. So when you read the report that has come up by OECD 2030, the projected growth of technology is way higher than the projected growth of education. So if you're talking about skill, the gap now, what is going to happen in 2030 and who is going to be accountable for it? So that I think is one of the major challenges. The second challenge that I feel is something called as learner empowerment. Universities by themselves have traditional houses. They have models of education are very conservative and traditional. And learners, especially in higher education, they get bound by curriculum, by policies, by content, and they are not fully involved in their making their own learning decisions, right? From people like policymakers to faculty, accreditation bodies, curriculum designers, learning managements. They are all those who design or the journey of the learner. And the third major challenge that I feel exists is inclusivity of education. As you said, EFA, this Education for All, it has always been an overarching SDG for UNESCO mandate, and which I think UNESCO in its recent report has said it has not been achieved yet. So providing this kind of an equitable learning opportunities to a very diverse population is still a challenge. So diversity exists not only in the form of ethnicities and region, financial diversities, cultural, socio-economic, these still exist. And I think the pandemic has brought in a new diversity, which is called a digital divide. So learning for life and furthering of education, literacy is still not reached as epitome of what we call as an inclusive education. These, I think, are the three major challenges that the future of education is going to see right now.
Wonderful, thank you. Iman, would you like to share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Damiana, for the kind introduction. And I totally agree with Dr. Mubina. And serving in the education profession for 16 years now, I've built new capabilities to achieve a theory around that innovative thinking and practices. And I've established that theory in which students learn and form a greater connection to the real world issues through skills-based and challenge-based learning, just like what Dr. Mubina has said. And since we have started with the challenges imposed on education to form a bridge between schooling and work life, I would like to start this dialogue with a perspective that education as a social institution that serves the needs of the society. It is required in order for the society to survive and thrive at the same time. It must not only be comprehensive, sustainable, and excellent, but it must also evolve in order to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing and unpredictable globalized world. In response to the rapid changes that we witness nowadays, I believe it is safe to say that online learning is a current challenge to education. We all know by now that online learning will play an increasingly important role in the education, in the future of education. But the problem will be to keep the learning, online learning, unorthodox or relevant to the societies and industries' future needs, which leads us to the second challenge, that organizations and business owners themselves are constantly battling to identify a ready pool of talent that can be hired with minimal training. So even as the number of universities offering new courses and facilities, the number is growing, still industries continue to outpace the schools and the universities' curriculum. So what happens is that students may receive solid theoretical knowledge through the online learning courses or even on-site learning that is happening in schools, but they still require on-the-job training to be completely competent. And as a result, I believe that education plays a crucial role in educating the next generation and equipping them with the necessary skills so that when they graduate from school and into the workforce, they are prepared to face the difficulties ahead. And this is the innovation that we are calling for. So in my opinion, when the focus shifts from providing information to providing space and chances for learning experiences, education at that point can become more innovative and the key to a sustainable education, which is the new method that focus on the learning skills again. So students nowadays demand to be offered skill-focused education and being engaged in educational activities, let's say, that would form a connection to those students or in those students' brains as to what, how, and why they are learning what they're learning. So the only way to form this connection is by placing more emphasis in connecting the curriculum to the social challenges that consequently will lead to the most important challenge, in my opinion, which is the role of education and schools in diffusing the, how do I put it, the ticking time bomb as we humans continue to deplete the planet's biocapacity in an exponential rate. Thank you.
Yes, I think that ties in well with the online components. And Suzanne, your background and your knowledge would definitely lend to this. How do you see these challenges combining the two? I'm hearing inclusivity, I'm hearing online learning, I'm hearing innovation. Please.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you so much for including me in this panel, and also really appreciate all the panelists' insights. It's really interesting. And I think one of the things that sometimes, and especially in more developing and emerging economies, it's one of the really crucial things to appreciate the level of maturity or sophistication in the infrastructure and also in the accessibility, especially with COVID. We have seen around the world how many children were actually barred from the education just because of the lack of accessibility and lack of connectivity. Very basic things that sometimes, if we try to import any kind of education frameworks, sometimes it becomes a very neocolonial way of, improving education, which leaves a lot of people behind, really creates a distinct of what is really needed by that specific labor market and what is really being educated at that level. So I think, of course, there is a need to really create a policy forum between an industry and between also education policy makers and the students themselves and the learners, and creating that forum would really then initiate and really find out what is really needed for each country instead of using a blueprint, which unfortunately, for example, there's that big thing working with governments and working with in tech. Sometimes you find, let's use the best practice of Finland. Why do you think Finland would really apply to another nation? That does not make sense, so it's really crucial to really take a step back and really try to find out and ideate and listen, be on a listening roadshow with those specific labor market, that specific, educators and also learners to really understand where do they need to stand. For example, something at Meta we are very proud of doing is really investing in digital literacy, because also digital literacy is as crucial as anything else that's going on now, because it is part of the, kids learn how to use an iPad before walking. So this is something really crucial to invest in and to really understand its importance, but also, again, going to the same thing of appreciating where each nation stands, where each economy stands, and it's nothing bad or nothing correct, but to avoid the blueprint, or let's use a best practice method, that would be an ideal situation, at least.
Thank you. And this is also valuable and holistically. Manal, you're tying all this together, and your background is inclusive of much of the points that were mentioned, and your knowledge in radicalizing education. Please share.
Thank you so much, Damiana. I'm very pleased to be with you here today with this esteemed panel as well, and with the audience. Actually, yes, whatever was said comes straight to the point. And I think one of the best things that we have to do is to re-examine our value chains. And what I mean by that, if we consider Porter's business analysis model, the value chain, which we already know this is the basis of the business, if we look from this, if we transfer it from the business vantage point to the education vantage point, and we consider that, and what he states is that you cannot understand the value from just looking at the firm, and that's what he called it, as a whole. All the value stems from those inner activities, those detailed strategic steps that are taken inside the institution. It means from the very beginning of production to the end of the delivery. So it's the same thing here in terms of education. When we really consider what we are teaching, mainly the content, and the industries actually are dictating us what we have to teach. So when we consider the content that we are teaching and our assessments actually, and basically the standards that need to be refined and the assessments that need to be personalized rather than be standardized the way it is today, well, we will definitely have a clear point and a clear vision of what the future of education should be like. And I think, for example, if we look into those practical steps and the activities that take place in our schools every day. For example, talking about sustainability, we all know that there is this sustainability, there are the learning objectives of sustainability. So if the school itself starts from this resource, which is available for all of us to use in our schools, and usually it is the ESD in particular, and it handles the cognitive, social, emotion, and behavioral domains. So with these learning objectives, when the school puts in its perspective, in its school improvement plan, to have all those, for example, objectives, then the process and the path will be clear because our objectives will be clear. So we really need to have those practical steps. And for example, moving also forward with sustainability, there are 3 domains of sustainability, mainly the technocentric, the ecocentric, and the social and the sociocentric. When we are connecting these 3 together, and then this is when we reach this inner part, which is sustainability that can be applied to all types of industry. Our main problem is the division, this separation, these gaps between the real world and what's happening inside the schools. And I think now we need to take these steps. So instead of just talking to our students about engineering, civil engineering, why don't we consider working on the sustainable civil engineering projects? For example, why don't we explain BIM, for example, the building information modeling. So when you start giving those main, what I call trigger, we can start sparing some ideas, then we are, I can say, gradually moving from the conventional way of teaching to this other innovative, which we are all calling for. So we need action steps mainly. And one more quick thing, there was a study in New Zealand in 2005, and they spoke about the model called the deprivation model, which is this the discrepancies and our consideration that the barriers, the socioeconomic, the gender, and all those types of barriers are real impediments, and because we have them, then we will not be able to proceed, and this is wrong. So it's also our mentality and who decides actually in our societies who to move forward and who to just keep in one place. So we have to take this this initiative to give them, to open the path for all those innovation, and so that no one is left behind at the end.
Thank you. This is all so valuable, and I'm seeing some incredible comments in the chat as well. Jasmine, really great points. We talk about innovation. We're always focusing on tech-based innovation, but many challenges require social innovation, which relates entirely with what each one of you shares. Now, moving forward, we've mentioned points about inclusivity. We've mentioned points in various different areas. As far as one size fits all does not work with different countries, with in different regions, in different areas and societies. Innovation needs to be customized. And so my question then following to that, who do you think the key players are? Suzanne, you had mentioned the policy forum where we all sit at one table. Who should be sitting at that table? I mean, are we overly ambitious in thinking the entire world can sit at that table? What are your thoughts on that? Who would be the key players behind this that would make an effective change and really change the system, the way it's run? Suzanne?
Definitely, it would depend on the country, the region that you're concerning with. So for example, some of the key ones that should always be there are policymakers. And the reason I say policymakers and not politicians is that because politicians can change. You need policymakers who actually can carry out this agenda in years, or even like there is a succession plan over there to give it to others. But also you need private educators, you need public educators or public institutions. And of course, you also need, if needed, for example, financial institutes or entities, because at the end of the day, that would also really be essential. You need the educators themselves, some people, if you have a union, that should be part of it. And I believe, of course, the learners themselves, or, they should also be available. And of course, industry should also be part of it. This is the industry. And the thing is, I think the issue is sometimes industry is really watered down to like a few couple industry representatives. But we really need to think also of where the economy is heading. There needs to be a socioeconomic and a political kind of analysis before getting everyone together and really identifying the key players who would be investing in that specific economy. But more than that is that also, for example, if we take some of the EU examples, is that they also include innovation centers where they are specialized in really thinking outside the box and not in the terms of bureaucracy that sometimes other entities would see it from. So I think this is some of the things that we can have in this policy forum. But also the key thing again is really creating a baseline research to really understand where we are and where do we really want to go, and what can really actually support us, and at the same time to also be globally competitive. So even if we're doing something including digital, we need to then also involve people who would ensure that connectivity. And we see it a lot from our point of view, where now there's a lot of work by big tech, getting involved to make sure that Africa or Middle East is getting more and more connected via the internet by huge infrastructure initiatives. So it's also really crucial to take that into consideration and not assume that the fastest thing to do is to put everything online just to catch up globally.
Now, in this case, in the past, I suppose innovations have been sort of driven by government, or more of the policy pushes, of course, initiated and driven to increase engagement and build on the economy of countries. And so from the higher education standpoint and the younger years, Dr. Mubina, Iman, how have you seen the engagement? How do you see who should be the drivers behind this? Is it industry that should be making the first move? Is it the educational institutions? Who should be? And of course, Suzanne and Manal, please jump in. You've been in touch, Manal, with educators for many, many years. And so from the learning perspective, who should drive this?
It could be a collaboration. I believe it should be a collaboration between business owners and academia. Because as we see that the globe transitions from an industrial to a knowledge-based economy, then the increasing demands of the new generation requires our education system as a whole to adopt an interactive approach with proper, of course, planning, strategizing of policies to use innovative practices and focuses primarily on engaging those students in those learning experiences where they can apply their own logic and knowledge, and as well as real life required skills. So I believe by collaborating with business owners, financial experts, governmental entities, with the educational institutions, we could build a strong bridge between academia and the industry needs. So I believe, I also agree that educational stakeholders and policymakers, financial experts, let's say, those who continue to approach education in the same way that we did a decade ago, where we placed, like the old ages, we placed teachers as the only source of information. Oh, I think they will, I don't know, if others are going like what we do now, the conversation, the dialogue that we have now, we recognize the importance of innovation in education. So I believe with the stakeholders of education, the policymakers, if they see this and they focus on developing the skills of the new generation, I believe we will get somewhere. We will close that gap between the academia and the industry, and there will be a match and no mismatches, and there will be no conflict between what we offer in schools and in education and what the kids face, and in terms of challenges and difficulties when they engage in a workforce or in a real life situation. So this way, I believe we will increase and improve the number of individuals in our community who contribute positively to our community locally and globally.
Yes, Dr. Mubina, from the higher education perspective.
Yes, so I completely agree with what Suzanne and Iman has told, about who should be the key players in the entire process. I think, it's high time we don't say who should take responsibility for it, as it is a complete ecosystem that we have to create. It is not possible for one entity to be more important than the other. It is I think we should move more towards a community kind of an outreach as opposed to a very commercialized outreach that we have in mind so far. So it should be learners, it should be academicians, school management, the government, most importantly, policymakers, industry, accreditation bodies. I think everybody should have a completely important role to play. So there is an entire new way of creating this ecosystem, what you call the GUI now, where you have government, universities, and industries together. I don't think we are reinventing the wheel. These processes and systems are in place, but it has not reached the level where we can say that everything is the future of education has reached where it has to be. If I have to specifically say a few changes that I would like to mention is probably one, as Suzanne also told, innovation in education, right? So every university, including university, our own university, we have innovation centers, we have incubation centers. And it is mainly for entrepreneurial and startup ideas. But when I say innovation in education, it is the pedagogy, right? Like how you teach in the classrooms. So moving away from traditional models of teaching and then coming up to very project-based models, right? Where, as she also pointed out, civil engineering project. Rather than teaching the theoretical part of it, it makes a lot of sense for them to move into the industry, look up for a problem, get a project, and then work backwards, and then submit that back to the industry. So that, as it is, brings up a great connect. Then the second thing is something called as immersive community engagement. Now, immersive community engagement is, as one of the speakers very clearly mentioned, that we had to have training. I think Ms. Iman mentioned this, that many companies do not provide training to fresh graduates, and they want to employ them at lower pay scales, which is true. That is what is happening. So then the education system comes up with a model where you have internships, where you have students going and working in the industry and getting credits for that, so that before they move out and before they start working into the entire workforce, they are already at least slightly prepared to where they are going. And of course, how can we forget the faculty themselves, right? When you speak about faculty, they are the main source where the knowledge is imparted. They are the ones who hold the fort. They transfer whatever the curriculum has made into the minds of students. And I think the pandemic has shown us how unprepared faculty were into handling technology, into handling online classes, into simulations, especially when you have scientific subjects. I don't think faculty could take it that easily. At least I can say a majority of faculty. Universities where this was already a culture, for them the transition was slightly easy. So upskilling faculty, training them at regular basis, which does not seem to be, there are a lot of conferences where knowledge is shared, but faculty's hands-on skills of how to keep themselves abreast with the more technological changes happening. So that is the one thing that should be done. And of course, industry. Industry is a major player, major player, because that will be the end point where the entire process stops. And that is where the industry has to come back to us in various forms. They can come back to us with engagements, they can come back to us with consultancies, or they can come back to us, I think one of the major roles the industry can play is set up their own offices. Like major companies have their own offices in one of the universities that they adopt, right? Like for example, Facebook takes graduates straight from Harvard and Stanford. So there is a small model that exists, but this is not a widespread and a grassroots model, which is, I think, one of the main innovations or main changes that should be happening in the industry and the education scenario. And that is where I see as the major players.
Thank you. And so I'm seeing a community collaborative approach, an ecosystem coming together. Yes. So we've addressed government, industry. Each of you have mentioned a piece of each different player that should be involved. I'm wondering, and Manal, I'd love your thoughts on this as well, and Suzanne, as far as the role of entrepreneurs and youth coming at the table. Where do you see their role in this ecosystem, in collaborating with educators, in really having a voice at the table?
Yes, I think what the panelists have mentioned, all those are key players, and the best thing is to think about the collaboration, because without the collaboration, then this is something that cannot be done alone. And if you allow me, I will be very quick, explaining just or adding a certain point to all whatever we have mentioned, because I personally see education as learning, not education the way we see it. And sometimes I ask myself, and I asked myself these questions years before, what if we were given other types of projects, other types of activities inside our classes? If we had done that, would we have reached this stage with this climate crisis, for example? Would we have been forced to set 17 sustainability goals? We wouldn't have had that. And if we ask ourselves also, if we really had those different types of experiences within the classrooms, between the interactions between the teachers and the students and the communities, would we have those high rates of crimes, of children abuse, of elderly abuse, of gender inequality issues, and so on? So that's why I talk about orbits as or our BITS, own your way, raise your standards, believe in your assets, integrate your mind and positive energy in motion in everyday, in all the tasks you do, tailor to your needs and aspirations, and spot and solve your problems practically. So here, if we really try to unlearn all those fixed equations that we have been programmed to do, then and learn something totally different. And I see learning as the as a fourfold structure. Actually, it's learning from our inner self, it's learning from the school, learning from the community, and learning from the parents, learning from the community, which means that we do not have to put the entire pressure of learning and growing on just the schools. We have to distribute it on 4 levels. Now, this might sound unconventional and hard to materialize, considering the jurisdictions and the educational systems that enforce our assessments on us. And we know that we are always asked to provide high scores and compete. But if we really think about it this way, then here comes the roles of the entrepreneurs, comes the role of the educators. So educators inside the classes are given different type of training, so that they are redirecting this learning to meet immediately the workplace, in whatever form it is, and all types of industry. Plus, it will help maintain this balance, which we truly need. We are all moving into technology now, this technology-based communities, but we do have to consider I will not just say the social emotional, it's even beyond that. So moving to the thoughts of the entrepreneurs and what they can bring to the table, that's very important, because what entrepreneurs can do actually is to customize. And by customization it's just like having the sculptor tool, so that you take a fixed system that is known to everybody, and this is the norm, and we cannot just move away from the norm, and try to recreate it in the way that really matters to our community. So instead of wasting all those years in our school years, whatever we studied in the school and university, we have just forgot like 80% of it. We are using only the 20% of what we have done. So I think entrepreneurs can bring on those solutions, those smart, intelligent solutions, those tools to have those research-based plans, strategic plans that are effective and efficient. And this is agility mainly, which we are expected to teach our learners as well, and help the youth, because these are what the youth needs to be self-directed. They need to be agile. They need to be also authentic in what they're doing, because we don't have time to waste. So it's in these 10 years, if we don't work strategically and authentically, then we will not be able to reach our goals and maintain our planet.
Thank you. And I would love to learn your thought, like Dr. Suzanne, I'd love, please, your input as well on the additional players, if they've been included or not. Who else needs to be at the table, and how can we incorporate that, even specifically, even to the point of accessibility, access to education? We're discussing the relevance and the essentially how relevant education, the skills students are learning right now with the industry requirements and skills needed for job training and filling those roles. But what else is needed? Who should be at the table to ensure the access is there?
I think one of the key things is that change of mindset when it comes to lifelong learning, for example. Having that lifelong learning mentality is really crucial, because if we say that's what the industry needs, that's where they are, or that's where the gap is, or that's where the technology is, we're going to be playing a game of catch up. So it's about changing that mindset of being a lifelong learner. For example, in Singapore, so one of the ways they made sure that citizens do have a lifelong learning system is that they created a credit system for all of the citizens. So even senior citizens, if they want to be educated in something, in some cyclical industries, then they're able to be educated on that, and they are, they're proven to be still relevant to the economy, as they would call it. So having that mindset, first and foremost, is changing that mindset. But also with regards to entrepreneurs is first putting that infrastructure, the legislative infrastructure for them, making sure that, because with education, any economy or any country that is able to innovate and is able to actually reach new levels there's a least friction as possible for entrepreneurs and innovators to actually go about it. And one of the things also is that entrepreneurs can sometimes fill those gaps, as Mana said, that fill the gaps that are not fulfilled by the industry or educators. But also sometimes what I've seen happening is that pushing everyone to become an entrepreneur. Not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur. Some people are going to be employees, and that's completely fine. They're going to be researchers, you know. I think it's really crucial to really just change the mindset to be a lifelong learner, have the legislations that are enabling people to have ease of doing business, but also ease of, you know, innovating and providing that research and development component in any country. I believe R&D is the key thing to in many subjects, sociology to STEM subjects, whatever it is, it's essential for any economy to go to the next level. We cannot copy paste anything. You cannot take someone's best practice and say, this is going to work for me. We have to really be well-rounded in our analysis, but definitely legislations, research and development, and changing the mindset even for people, which sometimes you see, like, you know, youth are growing up, they're like, yeah, I'll work for the government because it's a job security. And a lot of the governments now, even in the Middle East, are trying to shift that mentality and trying to get them to think more creatively of their jobs.
I think I
Wonderful.
totally agree with Suzanne, and I agree with Manal too, that entrepreneurs, as you asked Dimiana, the role of entrepreneurs in the entire ecosystem, I think they play a major role in the ecosystem, especially in higher education, if I have to say. Entrepreneurs bring at least one thing, that is investment, right? Investment, funding, research ideas, mentorship to great ideas. Right? There is a lot that they can do in an educational setup. And entrepreneurs by themselves are, they would have gone through a journey, they would have gone through a process. So that is something that they can always come back to share with their, with the student population. Entrepreneurial mindset, there is something that a lot of students do possess, an entrepreneurial mindset. So every time when a university launches an idea, and the idea comes up at a very early age, maybe let us say when the student has just entered university, but the student has to leave the university to be able to do something with that idea. So that is where we call in on entrepreneurs to help them incubate the idea, help them turn that idea into a project, and teach them the business model, provide them the required mentorship, and handhold them till they reach a certain stage. So on that note, I feel entrepreneurs actually play a very great role in at least in the educational setup. I would want to know what would Iman like to say to that?
Actually, on that point, sorry, Iman, did you want to share?
I really wanted to second what Susan said about the mindset. Yes. So the whole thing comes down to the mindset, and we need to focus on changing the mindset. Yes, entrepreneurs are really important, and we should encourage it and push for it, and push our students to reach beyond their limits. But at the same time, to just create that balance, we don't want everyone to be entrepreneurs. No. But we just want entrepreneurs. We need them at this point in time. And you see, the only way we change mindsets is by designing those learning experiences. We need to start from now. I love everything about, yes, planning, strategizing, crafting policies and everything, but let's just go down deep. The essence of all of this is how we instill in young people a love and a respect for nature, for their community, for their life. We need to deepening their understanding of the valuable, previously overlooked knowledge and the appreciation for life that previous cultures can teach us. This is another aspect of a sustainable education, when making students aware of the local parameters of environmentalism, so that they don't fall into the trap of viewing global, because this is what we face right now. The current generation I don't know if it's because of the previous years of traditional teachings that we have offered before, but the current generation view global issues as general, and the global needs are distant needs. So we need to change that. We need to stop them from ignoring their immediate surroundings, if it makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree to Iman. You know, the kind of skill sets that are being asked for these days are very emotional and social. You know, skills like empathy, skills like resilience, skills like sympathy, understanding. So these are the kind of skill sets that are seem to be in demand as opposed to the very practical skill sets that used to be there.
Exactly.
So, and even if you talk about jobs, yes, they think due to technology, a lot of jobs are being taken away, but that's not completely true. Only the routine jobs are being taken away, but there's a lot more non-routine jobs coming into picture, like data scientists, critical thinking, you know, creative thinkers. So the entire mindset of the student population, I agree, it needs to undergo a kind of a change that is required for the present world scenario.
We need to allow more space and chances for the young generation to explore and imagine. I always in my innovation classes, when I offer them a challenge or impose a challenge on them, they say, "Miss, can we be crazy? Like, can we imagine it?" And I'm like, if you can imagine it, then it will happen. All you have to do is just imagine it. So this is what we want them to, what we want to encourage. We want them to imagine solutions, because the moment they visualize it in their heads, it'll be able for them to see it, and they realize that, okay, it's possible.
It is
Yes,
possible.
we can change. We can change.
If you can think it, you can do it.
Bravo. Yes.
So now that we are losing time, I would like to ask
I
you
didn't keep track of time. Honestly, it just went so fast.
We could go on about this for hours, for sure. It's such a rich topic, and there are some really great comments in the chat from the audience, and some really insightful perspectives. And like where one here, Sarmad, he's mentioned we need students to be compassionate and concerned citizens, taking active participation and accelerating the collective well-being of our communities and planet. It all starts with education. And so tying that in with the topic of our conversation here and the role of industry in the future of education, what would you like the audience to take away from this conversation? A point or two that they could really take in practice, and really practical tips or takeaways that come out of this.
There is one point that I think we haven't touched upon when you said industry. It is the alumni, right? The entire student body that moves into the industry becomes the university or the educational system's alumni. So they can be great stakeholders to connect the industry and the education. And so it can be I think what is required as a big takeaway is the framework that needs to change, or that needs to be remodeled into making everyone accountable for creating this complete ecosystem that we require, from alumni to industry having something like an academic officer in every industry that they start, as opposed to, forget about very big industries, even a small industry should have one academic officer who ties up with some university in order to constantly create that synergy. And of course, make it compulsory for alumni to come back to your alma mater and then teach the younger students who are there as to what is required, what is the latest technology, what is the latest version, how do you adapt to new places, how do you coexist, what is your interpersonal skills that you require. So this is, I think, one of the key takeaways for me, as in the future of where education can be sustainable.
I would like to leave the audience with this thought that as educators, if you're an educator, let it be our purpose to raise awareness of concerns and difficulties around the world. Then let us collaborate in educational settings like this to provide sustainable solutions and contribute to the well-being of humanity, both locally and globally. So if we all share a common goal like that, when we offer opportunities of knowledge to our young generation, then I believe we will achieve the sustainability, not only in education, but in living, sustainability in living that we seek.
Susan?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, or a couple of the key things that I'd like to leave the audience with is engagement. Always engage, either the industry specifically, go out there and engage, the different elements. Do not limit education to having it in school or university. Have always the different stakeholders being involved from the get-go to really achieve something. Also, the second thing is allow your students to fail. There should be no fear of failure. And I think this is something that's really crucial. And honestly, when we embrace the sense of failure, then we would be able to know what works and what doesn't work for us. So, and again, thank you so much for having me here today.
And Manal.
It's actually invaluable conclusions from the three panelists. I will briefly end with sharing the 21st century orbits model when we have those four areas, which is the cognitive rigor, the technology or the digital rigor, social emotional rigor, and the global citizenship, all in equal focus. So we're not focusing on one area and disregarding the other. And the global citizenship, according to the way I see it, I would like to share with you human rights, peace, prosperity, inclusion, equity and equality, ecocentrism, innovation, wisdom, and conscious oneness. This way we are creating this infrastructure for the future. And I loved what Iman said, like when we are creating this from a very, very early age, and that's why here I call upon whoever within the audience, for our parents, because I think they are also those hidden key players. Let's give those children the path, the stage to speak out, so that if we really want to have, like in 3-4 years, let's say, for example, the next generation, we're building up on those years so that we can have more innovation for the future.
Wow. This is very, very, very rich insight from all of you. And before I close with remarks, I'd love to open up the floor to the audience. If they have, we can take 1 or 2 questions. I'm really sorry. We can stay for a few more hours, but not tonight. So if anyone has any questions from the audience, and first I must apologize, the comment was from Parisha, not Sarmad. He had mentioned the comment earlier, that was also very impressive. But if anyone has any questions, we can take some. And in the meantime, I'd also love to recap the conclusions that have been drawn from tonight's conversation. We discussed building ecosystems and collaboration, and not one party is actually a driver. We can all drive it together and really start it. Anyone can be the igniter of these conversations and really build these communities. And we've discussed a few different roles within, not only limited to traditional educational institutions, but also entrepreneurs and youth. And it really all starts with each one of us. So the traditional models don't work. We all agree on that. And so to transition into more creativity, more imagination, reimagining our future is really where we should go. And we've got some great tips from our speakers here in engaging alumni, in learning from the industry perspective and really engaging with them and building that ecosystem further from within the higher education system. And educators also, as Iman had shared, very valuable. The advocacy efforts and really the building up of the need and raising awareness, as well as co-creating solutions together from the educator perspective. And Suzanne and Manal, also very rich insight. Manal, you had so much involved in your takeaway that I'm going to have to look it up on your website. But essentially, the global citizenship, social, emotional, cognitive, and Suzanne finishing up with allowing students to fail. And there's really no such thing as failure. It's all a learning experience. And so I thank you all. And I see that there are no questions in the chat. So I'm going to pass on the mic to Keshav. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimiana. And I think one reflection that I usually have on education that I can share from alluding to one of my favorite philosophers and educationists, John Dewey, is that education is not the preparation of life, but life itself. So I think it's adding to everyone that has said something. I think we should also see the live examples of what education can do to inspiring leaders, how it has built us, and how then we can emit more light and I think help to the rest of the world. And I think one key takeaway again for me that I can say was that there is education is also important to bring things from within us. So I think this is where a lot of compassion, I think collaboration, empathy, creativity can be really unlocked from within all human beings. And I think finally, today I was watching a science show on one of the OTT platforms, and they were talking about how the beaches that we go to, the white sand beaches, they have been formed from the fish over like millions of years, and so is the limestone, and literally everything that we have done is with all the other life forms. So I think one key takeaway for me was a reflective question, that what will I leave behind as my legacy for the future, and how our actions today are definitely going to be remembered and have an impact for a very long time, which is where the future of education ties into the present with all of us. So thank you to all the speakers, our esteemed panel, and our moderator, Dimiana, for this amazing dialogue. To all our wonderful audience members who've been enriching the entire conversation through their perspectives on the Zoom chat and the Facebook Live. Some people never are on the screen, but they play very big roles. So I'm just going to quickly acknowledge them as well as our partners, people of impact. Their founder, Noha Hefni, our beloved colleague. She was unwell, so she could not make it, but just due credit to her to also envision this entire conversation. Colleague Sandra from People of Impact, Jasmine from the Dais, Arshia and Sangeet, who wonderfully supported us with a very smooth conversation today. So thank you once again, all of you. We will be taking all these conclusions and we will be taking them ahead to the Learning Planet team. And again, the journey doesn't conclude here. I think, for the matter of fact, it starts from here. So let's hope that we can all actually make these takeaways actionable through our respective roles, whether we are in the industry, governance, whether we are an entrepreneur, whether we are a student. Let's all make the push from wherever we are, and it may be something from here or there, but we are trying to move the same mountain together. So with that hope, we will be concluding our dialogue. And once again, a big thank you to everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Learning Planet Festival. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.